which is a great way for me to ask you, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, sitting there in India, and this is not necessarily your region, but what's happening here, how does it affect you? What do you see happening in Syria? And more to the point, on the topic of this conference, how does one innovate with dialogue out of, let's just take the Syria situation right now. We can hang the Iran off that, but Syria.
Well, let me go back to your first question. Is it a surprise? The answer is yes. I would also agree with Sheikh Mohammed in the sense that, the region was in such prolonged ferment that surprises will occur when this goes on for so long. Yes, we are to some distance away. But let me just put that in some perspective. We still have about 500,000 Indians who live in Mediterranean countries. We have a trade of about $80 billion with the Mediterranean. Now that's the Mediterranean. If I'm looking at the Gulf, we have 10 million Indians here and maybe about $180 billion of trade. Now why do I mention that? Because I think what's happening in Syria, what's happening in the larger region, what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon, and the combination of all of this, there is a larger regional instability which is actually growing month on month. It is impacting, as a country on that side of Asia, we are feeling the impact of this. I mean, we're feeling it in shipping costs, we're feeling it in trade disruptions, we could see it in radicalization. I mean, so today, instability anywhere actually is a source of concern. There's no region you can say that's far away and it doesn't matter to me anymore. And by the way, this region is not so far away, and our interests are there, as I spelled out.
But to you, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, it is said that certainly we know Prime Minister Modi had a very close relationship with President Trump in his first term. We know that the Biden administration also, in fact, they were trying to hopefully drive a wedge or attract you from China and into the US sphere more. But President-elect Trump...
We were trying to attract them into the Indian sphere.
Okay. I don't know how it worked out, but right now you've got a whole threat of tariffs in the whole region and all the rest of it. President-elect Trump has also threatened BRICS, of which you are a member, with 100% tariffs if this and that. What do you expect for India and for your economy and your relationship with the United States and regional implications as well from that kind of message already from President Trump-elect?
We had a good relationship, a very solid relationship with the first Trump administration. Yes, there were some issues, mostly trade-related issues, but there were a whole lot of issues on which actually President Trump was very international. He was very forward-leaning, and I remind people that it was actually under Trump that the Quad was restarted. So if you look at the Indo-Pacific today, I mean, certainly President Biden built on it, but if you look at the Indo-Pacific today, in fact, it's an area where the United States made new commitments, as indeed did all of us. So I would say, from our perspective, quite honestly, I mean, there's a certain personal relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. I would say in terms of politics, we don't really have divisive issues in terms of our political outlook. As two countries, by and large, I think our convergences way outstrip any differences we have. Where the BRICS remark was concerned, I think, I'm not exactly sure what was the trigger for it, but we've always said that, look, India has never been for de-dollarization. Right now, there is no proposal to have a BRICS currency. So I'm not quite sure what is the basis for.
He said if you stop pegging it to the dollar, but there wasn't a threat to do that, was it?
Well, the BRICS do discuss financial transactions, but certainly where India, BRICS doesn't, each country doesn't have an identical position on this. But where India is concerned, certainly, look, the United States is our largest trade partner, and we have no interest in weakening the dollar at all. But I just want to make one remark come back to the Middle East. The core issue undoubtedly is Palestine and Israel's relationship. How do they reach a modus vivendi? There's a larger issue side by side, which is the widening of this conflict, which is also a major concern. And, today we have, I don't want to say we normalized it, but the fact is, 2 years ago, the prospect of Israel and Iran actually firing at each other would have been appalling. It's something which we couldn't have even contemplated. And yet it's happened. If you look at what's happening in the Red Sea and the impact for shipping in Asia, it's huge. So I think, there are different challenges, layers of them. But just like the journalists who sat on these chairs before us told us, look, it's a tough world, very difficult, but we journalists have to do our job. Yeah. I think similarly, diplomats of the world have to tell themselves, it's a messy world, it's terrible, there are conflicts, but therefore there's all the more reason for diplomats of the world to step forward. And that era, which we saw in the 60s and 70s, which is either the Security Council managed it, or a few countries, mostly the major powers did it. I think that era is behind us. Yeah. I think all of us in different ways need to step forward. So, for example, what Qatar is doing, there are so many conflicts. We are trying to do something in Ukraine. We see Myanmar as almost a kind of a forgotten conflict, where there's an approach like, let's not invite them and the problem will solve itself. So I think there is a greater case for more vigorous diplomacy, for more innovative diplomacy, for a more participative diplomacy, and I think more countries need to have the boldness to bite that bullet.
Foreign Minister Jaishankar, I want to ask you and ask all of you in a moment, the major war roiling Europe. So you get a lot of cheap oil still from Russia, I believe. Cheap
I get oil, yes.
Huh?
I get oil, yes.
Yeah.
It's
right.
not necessarily cheap.
But it's Russian.
If you have a better deal, I'm willing to look at it.
But it's Russian, and it's a good deal for you, despite sanctions and all the rest of it. It has been said that Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, etc. are sort of forming or have formed an axis of anti-Americanism, anti-Westernism. And I want to know, does India have a role to play, or what do you believe will be the momentum on this Russia invasion of Ukraine and the resolution? I know the Foreign Minister Lavrov is going to speak. What do you think is going to happen, particularly with the Trump administration, who I know they're not in office, but they have very, very clearly telegraphed that they don't want to keep helping Ukraine militarily?
Two comments. One, regarding the conflict, the war itself. We have always held to the view that this war is not going to be solved on the battlefield. That at the end of the day, people are going to return to some kind of negotiating table, the sooner the better. And our effort has been to facilitate that to the extent possible. Now, to be honest with you, that's not always been the most popular thing, at least in some parts of the world. But I do think today the general the needle is moving more towards the reality of a negotiation than the continuation of the war. We are trying to do, the bit I told you about why it's important for diplomacy to come forward. Yeah. Now we are really putting, in a way, our aircraft, our legs where our mouth is. We are actually doing, going to Moscow, talking to President Putin, going to Kiev, engaging President Zelensky, meeting them in other places, trying to see if we can encourage, find common threads which can be picked up at some point of time when the circumstances are right for it to be developed. We're not attempting a peace plan. We're not doing a mediation in that sense. We are doing multiple conversations and very transparent about telling each party, saying, look, at the end of the conversation, this is what we're going to tell the other party. We think that's, at this point of time, the most useful country diplomatically. We also believe in this, that we articulate the sentiments and the interests of the global south, 125 other countries who have found their fuel costs, their food costs, their inflation, their fertilizer costs impacted by this war. So there is a constituency out there which says, please do this, please, carry on with this. And quite honestly, in the last few weeks and months, I've even seen this sentiment expressed by European leaders, major European leaders, who are actually telling us, please keep engaging Russia and engaging Ukraine. We welcome that. So we do think that things are moving somewhere in that direction. Your second point about, is there such an axis? Look, perhaps in your world it sounds very effective and dramatic to sort of make this sort of sweeping assertion.
I didn't make it up.
Yeah,
they did.
No, but in my world, that's not the reality. Every country has its interests. They agree some, they disagree some, they work some. Sometimes the same countries work in different combinations in different issues. The reality is much more complicated, much more granular. And I caution people, saying don't go for this very sweeping generalities, because they become self-fulfilling if you actually accept them. Okay. I don't accept that. I do think each one of these is a nation with some history, with some certain self-regard, and each one of them is in it for themselves.